Okay, it's 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the City of Escondido's Transportation and Community Safety Commission meeting of July 14, 2022. Would you please stand and join me in the flag salute? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call. Clerk, want to assist me, or I do the roll?
I can do it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so Rachel Castlebaum. Here. Amanda Phillips. Here. George Correa is absent. Francis Boomer.
Here.
Sorry. Larry Third.
Here.
Bill Durney.
Here.
And Lori Hoppy. Here.
Welcome back, everybody. We do have a quorum. And it's that time again that we nominate and elect a new chair and a vice chair for this commission. It's a very important job. Doesn't pay that well, but it uses great work for the city. Make a difference here in the community. So let's start off with the chair position. Do I have any nominations?
Sure, I'll nominate our current vice chair to be the chair, which would be Mr. Thornburg next to him.
I'll second that. We have to vote on this. Right? It's been a while.
Yeah, no, you can vote on it if you want me to call it out.
Yes. Let's make it official.
Okay. So, Rachel Castlebaum? Yours can say yes now. Yeah. Commissioner Phillips? Yes. And then Chair Spoonmore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Thornburg?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Durney?
Yes.
And Commissioner Hoppy?
Yes.
So, motion carries 5-0.
Okay.
Commissioner Corey absent. Right? That's it.
And I would,
First I motioned it, that was 6-0. One is absent. Thank you.
As we speak about the position of vice chair, Bill, were you going to say something?
yes, I would actually like to nominate Commissioner Hadley to be vice chair.
Have I been here long enough to be able to do it? Okay, then I'll accept on that vote. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll second that.
So we have Commissioner Castlebaum,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips. Yes. Chair Spoonmore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Thornburg,
Yes.
Commissioner Durney,
Yes.
and Commissioner Hatley.
Yes, and thank you.
Perfect. Yes.
Thank you for the privilege.
So that's approved 6-0, Corey absent.
Okay. Congratulations.
And thank you for accepting.
And thank you for accepting. Okay.
They've done that, so.
I was going to nominate you, Commissioner Durney, to beat me to the.
Okay, and again, welcome back to our commissioners, our returning commissioners, and our new commissioner is still out. Okay? All right.
There's no oral communications.
No public comments today? Okay. Okay, approval of the minutes of February 24th, 22 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Approved 6-0, Corey absent.
Okay. It looks like we have no consent items. I'm going to jump right into new business. Speed surveys, various locations citywide.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Virpiku Karotsalainen. I'm Associate Traffic Engineer here with the city. I am going to present item F1, certification of new speed surveys. I do apologize, I recall, I'm trying to get through the presentation. Speed limits are set based on the 85th percentile speed as required by the state law. However, speeding is the leading cause of fatal car collisions in the U.S. Aggressive driving is causing over 50% of all collisions in the U.S. I've included this picture on the bottom. You may have seen this in previous presentations, but it's important information, and it shows you how the vehicle speed results in fatalities in pedestrians. So, for example, vehicle traveling on 20 miles per hour in a crash causes a pedestrian fatality with 10% ability. With 30% mile per hour speed, this rises to 40%. And when the vehicle speed is 40 miles per hour, over 80% of these result in a fatality in pedestrians. Our speed surveys are something that we maintain here at the city. We do have over 200 speed limit segments within the city property. The speed surveys must be updated either 5, 7, or 14 years. The 14 years is something new that we have an option to do with the California vehicle property. Updating these speed surveys ensures that the speed limits reflect the current conditions on the roadway. The CBC section 223586 requires speed limit to be posted at the nearest 5 mile per hour increment with the 85th percentile speed. And this 85th percentile speed is calculated based on prevailing speed of 100 vehicles. So when we gather the speed data of 100 vehicles, we then determine the 85th percentile speed. Of this 85th percentile speed, we have the option to round down. For example, if the 85th percentile speed is 37 miles per hour, then the speed limit would be posted at 35. We also have the option to round up. So if the 85th percentile is 38, then the posted speed would be 40. We do have an alternative where if the 85th percentile speed require rounding up, the speed limit may be rounded down to the lower 5 miles per hour increment in accordance with the CBC section 223586. So for example, 38 miles per hour would round up to 40 miles per hour, but in this case we would round it down and the speed limit would be posted at 35 miles per hour. We now also have an option to determine speed limit by ordinance. This is something that became available with the Assembly Bill 483 when it took effect on January 1st, 2022. This also resulted in changes to California Vehicle Code. So in the new vehicle code, the local authority may, by ordinance, retain the current speed limit or restore the immediately prior speed limit in accordance to CBC section 223583. If the local authority finds that the speed limit is still more than is reasonable or safe after completing an engineering survey. With the new CBC, when we determine the speed limit by ordinance, we can determine and declare a 25 mile per hour prima facie speed limit on a roadway that's contiguous to a business activity district. And this is something that CBC 223589 allows us to do. This is new CBC code. Maximum posted 30 mile per hour prima facie speed limit immediately prior to and after the business activity district is required. The local authority shall not declare a prima facie speed limit under this section on a portion of the highway where the local authority has already lowered the speed limit as permitted under sections 223587 and 8. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. is a list of our recommendations for this meeting. I'm not going to go over all of these. These were mentioned in the package that you have. But I would like to point out that the segments Vista Avenue and Bennett Avenue, these segments, the recommended speed limit is lower, lower than before. Also, the Broadway segment and Chestnut Street segment. That's the one. So on the Broadway segment, the speed limit indicates coming down from the 88% speed to the lower increment, and same with the Chestnut Street segment. We have the second segment of Broadway and Country Broadway, where the speed limit will be retained to the existing speed limit with the new vehicle code 2235 HSD. And then we have the Grand Avenue Business District, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next
I have a question on number 1. Are we removing the when children are present, drop-in speeds to 25 when children are present?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, because it doesn't show on the recommended.
Yes, I see that on this. Yeah, that's
Thank you.
absolutely not. We'll keep that in place. So as a summary, retaining the posted speed limit, these are the segments where we will retain the existing speed limit. Vista Avenue, Bennett Avenue, Country Parkway, and Broadway, between Lincoln Parkway and Belmont Parkway. And then we have 2 segments with the reduced speed limit. Chestnut Street between Juniper and Fifth Avenue and Broadway between Country Broadway and Chestnut King Road. And on both of these cases, the 85th percentile was rounded down to the lower overall increment due to factors such as driveways and pedestrians entering the roadway or day speed. So now going back to the business activity district, I mentioned that there is a new CBC code 2235 and this allows a creation of business activity district. This district must meet 3 of the following requirements. No less than 50% of the contiguous property fronting the highway consists of retail or dining commercial uses, including outdoor dining, and these should open directly on the sidewalks adjacent to the highway. Parking must be located alongside the roadway. Traffic control signals or stop signs regulating traffic flow on the highway should be located at intervals no more than 600 feet. And also marked crosswalks at all uncontrolled locations where we have no traffic control devices. So all these, 3 of these criteria must be met so that an area or segment can be determined as a business activity district. California Vehicle Code requires that the business activity district does not have more than 4 vehicle travel lanes and has a maximum posted speed limit of 30 miles per hour immediately prior to and after the business activity district. This explains the speed limits, the existing posted speed limits on Grand Avenue. You can see that west of Green Street, we have a 35-mile-per-hour segment, and then we have the existing 30-mile-per-hour segment for rest of the For this proposed business activity district, where we have a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, you can see that west from Queens, we have a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit. And in the CBC code, 30 miles per hour was required immediately prior to and after business activity district. So that would not meet the criteria. And on the east end, east of Juniper, more than 600 feet between traffic controls and no uncontrolled marked crosswalks on that segment. So that one would not qualify for a business So with that information, we determined that the segment between Central City Parkway and Juniper Street would meet this criteria and would qualify as a business activity district. And then we would have those 30-mile-per-hour segments running straight on both sides. So with this, staff is asking permission to approve the staff recommendations, certifying the proposed speed limits, and also recommend to City Council pass the ordinance retaining the existing speed limit on those segments, and pass the ordinance declaring the relocation speed limit on Brenda Avenue to be 25 miles per hour on the segment that we discussed, and determining that the limits between CCP and Juniper meets the characteristics of business activity district per CBC 22-358-9, and also to approve the reduction of both speed limits on two segments by 5 miles per hour. Do you have any questions that we have to answer questions?
Yeah, I just have one question on the change coming in from 35-mile-an-hour zone with a perfect. That's pretty quick to drop from 35 to 30.
That's exactly.
And then 25, and I'm just wondering, is it possible to drop that 30 sooner? Meaning, can we hit 30 miles an hour a little sooner or something? Just trying to say, okay, here's a sign for 30, and then the next block over is 25, just seems a little close.
I was thinking that too, Bill, but Quince and Center City are both pretty major intersections.
Yeah.
You're stopping there a lot.
You are.
Pretty rarely going to go continuously through that section, so.
Yeah.
But you could pull it back to the creek. But I'm not sure what it is.
You're right, you're really stopped just,
You never make it. I never make it. Quince. High school, so busy. No one's coming at us.
You're right. It's just a quick transition, but understandable.
Yeah, that's something, doesn't meet that criteria, but, we could look into that, so we can see, maybe a new speed survey would be more.
But the motion is just really between Center City and Juniper, right?
That is correct. So that area will be determined as a business activity district with the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, and then we need to have those 30-mile-per-hour segments on those.
Right.
So just going along with that, I imagine it wasn't addressed, but it doesn't say anywhere in the vehicle code that there has to be a certain distance, for the, like the 30-mile-per-hour zone, since that's just kind of a short, long block. It doesn't say like to change from 35 to 30 to 25. You need a minimum distance of so many feet for a certain speed to be posted. I didn't see it anywhere, so I imagine it doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't say that.
Any other discussion or comments? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve as presented by staff? Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Approved 6-0, absent Corey.
2223 Traffic Management Project List, TMPL.
So I'm also going to present an item F2, and I'm pulling the mic closer, so hopefully you can. Item F2, review and approve of City of Escondido TMPL, Traffic Management Project List. Today I'm gonna give you an overview of the Traffic Management Project List program. We're gonna discuss the designs and project cost estimates for 5 projects. I'm going to give a brief overview of each project with the focus on the solutions. And then commissioners will give a final approval of funding and implementation considering the $50,000 budget. Traffic traffic management project list is a list of safety improvement projects that are typically initiated by public, different groups of public, or staff. This is a policy that was established in 2014, and also the scoring criteria for these projects was approved in 2014. On the right side, you can see a typical cycle. This might be familiar for most of you. So this shows that typically in April, we look at the prioritization of projects, and then in July, the project selection and budget approval is done. For this cycle, 2022-23 TMPL, we had 5 projects that were nominated by residents or school staff. The first project is Felicity Avenue at Montview. Second one is Hidden Valley Middle School crosswalk improvements. This one was nominated previously. It was on the 2021-22 TMPL list. Number 3 is Vista Avenue traffic calming. Number 4, Felicita Elementary School crosswalk improvements. This was also in a previous cycle, 2021-22. And our last 5th project is Canyon Road crosswalk improvements. So due to the cancellation of the April meeting this year, all of these projects were evaluated for potential improvements and designs. So here you can see the traffic management project list scoring criteria. You can see that we look at several different conditions, including road conditions, road usage, effectiveness of the solution that we're proposing, and the problem severity. The maximum points a project can score is 30 points. Here we have scored the 5 projects. You can see that the highest score is for the Felicita Avenue at Montview improvements with the score of 19 points. The second one is Hidden Valley Middle School crosswalk improvements at Reed Road and Moody Drive with 18 points. Vista Avenue traffic calming also scored 18 points. Felicita Elementary School crosswalk improvements at Tulip and 15th Avenue with 14 points. And the last one with the lowest score was Canyon Road crosswalk improvements. More briefly going to go over these projects. More detailed information was in the package. So our first project, Felicita Avenue at Montview, was nominated by residents due to concerns with roadway departure and property damage crash risk. Our existing conditions do include buffered bike lanes and curb warning signage. The striping was updated a couple of years ago. We have a posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour with a curb warning signage for 30 miles per hour. And we have an ADT of about 13,600 average daily traffic on this segment. Due to the nomination and concerns, this location was also evaluated as part of the citywide local roadway safety plan, which we have talked about here in our previous meetings. So when we looked at this location with the local roadway safety plan and also with this TMPL project, we really looked at each and every single crash at that location, trying to understand what is happening over there. We realized that all of the causes for these accidents was unsafe speed or driving under the influence. Most of these were involved with fixed objects, such as property or parked vehicles. And all the collision types were broadside crashes or hitting an object. All our site visits confirm that we do have clear lines of sights available at this location, and the speed data that we have gathered supports the posted speed limit. The intersection is not signalized, but most of these collisions were not related to any of the turning movements. And the existing curb warning signage is properly angled to be seen by approaching drivers, and there is also a street light located at the curb. So all this in mind, the roadway was reevaluated for solutions to improve driver behavior at that location. Our proposed improvements for these locations would be two-phased. In first phase, we would install pavement markings, reflectors, flexible delineator posts, and additional signage. The phase 2 would be an installation of the radar speed feedback sign before the curve, really bring attention to the vehicle speed. The estimated cost for these improvements would be about $8,000 for the phase 1, and then the phase 2 radar sign will add about $9,000 to that cost. Our second project was the Hidden Valley Middle School project, where we have an existing and controlled mid-block crosswalk on Reed Road. We had concerns. We were brought, the school staff heard concerns of cars not moving to students when students are crossing. The proposed improvements are based on the existing roadway conditions, with the average daily traffic about 1,450 vehicles per day, and the speed limit 40 miles per hour with a school speed limit sign of 25. The school has about a little over 1,000 students, and approximately 90 to 110 students use this crossing at morning and afternoon. Here's two pictures that better show you the existing locations and the existing crosswalk. For this location, our proposed improvements would be the standard treatments based on our crosswalk policy. So we would construct a new ramp at the north end, and then we would also reconstruct the ramp at the south end of the crosswalk. We would install the yellow high visibility crosswalk on Reed Road. We would also add yield pavement markings, and we would refresh the school crossing markings. We'd add new double-sided crossing signage on both sides of the street, and then we would refresh advanced crosswalk and school signage. The estimated cost for all these improvements is about $21,000, and this also includes the ramp and sidewalk repairs. Our third project is Vista Avenue. Vista Avenue was constructed and designed as part of the Canyon Grove Estates development. The roadway design is consistent with the general plan circulation element for a local collector roadway. The Vista Avenue roadway provides future connections to Rincon Avenue and North Avenue. With the Canyon Grove Estates subdivision traffic plan, we have a two-way left turn lane and no on-street parking. However, the future traffic forecasts show roadway having the ADT less than 10,000 vehicles per day. This supports the residential street classification. Residential street also allows on-street parking, which the residents had requested. Residential street, this also meets California Vehicle Code and could be posted at 25 miles per hour. Meets all the requirements. Residents notified City Council, City Manager, and staff. They had concerns of speeding vehicles, and also they were reporting cut-through traffic along Vista Avenue. So based on these concerns, we conducted several traffic studies. These showed that the average daily traffic was a little over 1,000 vehicles a day, and the 85th percentile speed was 37 miles per hour, with the average vehicle speeds about 30 miles per hour. However, the morning and afternoon peak hour average speeds were about 37 and 38 miles per hour. So our police department began enforcement and issued several citations. During those field visits and enforcement visits, observations were made that most speeders were those cutting through the neighborhood. So they continued enforcement. We conducted another traffic study, and however, we realized that even after the enforcement and placing a speed trailer, the speeds were only reduced by 1 mile per hour in the 85th percentile speeds. So something new needed to be done. So typically a stop control assigns right away at the intersection, and it's not used to slow down traffic, but stop controls are part of the city's traffic management toolbox. So for this location, we recommend alwaay stops to be installed at McGeary Road and East Avenue, and the this proposed always stop would work in tandem with the existing always stop at Canyon Grove Road to reduce vehicle speeds and also reduce cut-through traffic. Canyon Grove Estates Homeowners Association was informed of this recommendation, and the HOA discussed at their regular meeting and provided the opportunity for all the residents to comment, and then the board voted to approve the always stop at East Avenue and McGeary Road. So our improvements at this location would include the installation of the stop signs and stop bars, pavement markings to match the design at the Canyon Grove Road. We'd also install additional signage. The estimated cost for these improvements would be about $4,000 since there are no ramps included or required for this location. Pedestrian ramps are already in place. Our fourth project is Felicita Elementary School. This is the one from previous TMPL cycle. We have existing parallel stop crosswalk bars. We have a stop control at Tulip, and its location is uncontrolled at 15th Avenue. Felicita Elementary School has about 550 students, and this crosswalk is used by about 50 to 30 pedestrians, and this crosswalk also serves on a route to Boys and Girls Club. School staff and parents came forward with concerns that the cars were not yielding to students crossing the street, and they had also observed speeding on 15th Avenue. So here you can see the existing conditions at this location. Our proposed improvements for these locations are reconstructing the ramp at the south end of the crosswalk. We would also install the yellow high visibility crosswalk for both legs. We would install new yield lines and double-sided crosswalk signage and refresh the school pavement markings. We would also refresh all the advanced crosswalk and school signage. And the cost estimate for this project is about $17,000, and this includes the ramp. And our last fifth project is the Canyon Road at Brenda Greenway. This is also a school location where we have Classical Academy, a charter school, with about 1,200 students. The school schedule alternates so that at most the school has about 700 students on campus. Canyon Road is a residential street with average daily traffic of about 600 vehicles per day based on the January count. And the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. All of the school entrances open to Canyon Road. You can see the big parking lot that is a church parking lot that the school is using for parent pickup drop-off parking. School staff nominated this location for the improvements. So based on that, we conducted traffic studies. We learned that the ADT was about 600, little less than 600 vehicles per day. And on the peak hour, we had about 70 vehicles. The 85th percentile was 32 miles per hour, which is typical for residential speed, so we didn't observe any speeding. We don't have any reported accidents in the last 5 years, but we do have up to 200 pedestrians crossing in the afternoon, using this as a main exit from the school. So while we were conducting our site visits, we realized that the location may benefit from clearing the site distance, so we added red curving, which you can see in for all So proposed improvements for this location would be based on the crosswalk policy, the standard treatments. So that means upgrading the crosswalk to yellow continental style high visibility across Canyon Road. And then also installing the new yield markings, slow school crossing pavement markings on the approaches. We would also install the other signage such as the yield here to pedestrians and refresh the advanced school warning signs. The construction, we would need to construct one new ramp on the west side. And the cost estimate for this project is about $8,000 to $24,000, and that's a big range due to the ramp design. We are aware that there may be several utility conflicts, so that's why our cost estimate is so low. So again, here is our priority table with the cost estimates. So with this in mind, and considering the $50,000 budget, the staff recommends that the projects 1, 2, 3, and 4 would be implemented. These are the projects: Felicita Avenue at Montview, Hidden Valley Middle School crosswalk improvements, Vista Avenue traffic calming, and the Felicita Elementary School crosswalk improvements for implementation. And then the project number 5, Canyon Road crosswalk improvements, will carry over for the next TMPL cycle. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good, I've got a couple of questions. My first question is, have our protocols and processes changed? I'm used to seeing, I know in the past we've had residents from especially Eucalyptus Avenue, and there are a couple of other streets that we've had people come to talk to us about making changes. Now all of a sudden, we're seeing the changes are being made without people coming to us, so it kind of cuts us out of the loop after we're the ones who are supposed to be watching over everything and helping determine where things go. I mean, numbers 1 and 3 here, I don't think we ever saw this at a commission meeting. The other ones, we normally say on the school projects, let's look at those. But I'm just wondering where like number 1 and 3 came from. I don't think we had seen that before. Do you recall that?
I don't really see it, no.
So I don't think we previously approved these, and they kind of snuck on here. And I mean, I know we always go for schools first.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is that because of you mentioned the April meeting was canceled, so?
Well, all these projects, Felicita Avenue at Montview and the Vista Avenue, they came from the residents with several requests from the residents to staff and city manager. So I am not sure if they have contacted transportation commissioners, but I know there were several requests for those, and that's why they were included in the evaluation. And what's different this time is that we're doing both the scoring and deciding on the project in this one meeting due to that April cancellation. So that's the only thing that's different, but nothing else has changed. But we do realize that we have completed so many school projects that we haven't had any other school projects nominated by school staff.
Mm-hmm.
So these, after, I think these are the last school projects that we have left. So staying.
Okay.
I just have, and looking at these, the first one, the Felicity Avenue, I know that the big cause was the impaired drivers, which is usually a visibility issue. And I know Caltrans is looking at these types of improvements all the time as well, because they have people going the wrong way in the freeway, some pretty obvious issues, but at night with impaired drivers, so they work on a lot of these more, I guess, they're kind of changing their toolbox with more red arrows or flashing lights, and so you see now the yellow caution arrows with flashing lights over here, they make it more vibrant. So the issue here, I think, is the drivers don't see the curve. So it's not that they think they're going too fast, they just have no idea a curve's coming, even though there's some yellow signs. And I'm not sure if the city has those types of flashing kind of arrow boards, the yellow signage in their toolbox, but that may be something that would help with this one. I do think the bollards proposing may help, but those are generally, that's part of the kind of like class 2 or the buffered bikeway design, which looks like the same ones the city has right here on Valley, which makes it easy to maintain, which makes sense. But that was just my thought. I'm not saying this doesn't work. I mean, it does say effectiveness of solution is 1, which I would agree. Even doing all this restriping may not help because it's a sharp corner. Simple as that. And even if you have you put more paint on the ground, you're not going to slow the driver down. He's not going to see the curve still. But the bollards may help. But I mean, I wouldn't rank this number 1. I'm not saying
Neither would I.
I oppose the improvements.
Yeah, I've seen, at the end of my street, I live off the center section of Citrus Valley Parkway. It dead ends with a white rail fence. Once a year, someone will drive right through that fence.
Yeah, there's a dead end street and same thing. There's people have run off. I live at the end of Bellevue, and people go into the neighbor's house probably 3 times a year because there's a 15-mile-per-hour turn. But you go from 50 to 15, and they don't see it for some reason. It's pretty obvious it's there. But
Yeah.
the city moved the fire hydrant, which is good. After it knocked down twice, they moved it to the other side of the street, which makes sense.
Yeah, it ranked number 1 due to the frequency of accidents.
Frequency, yeah.
and the speeding.
I see that, yeah.
That's what.
And I do think the school projects 2 and 4 are good. The Canyon Road, it's a dead-end street, so I have a feeling that most of the traffic is just the school traffic itself. So they're caught in this circle of cars coming in, dropping off, and then trying to leave when kids are moving around. So because the ADT is really low. And the Vista Avenue, agree with you that stop signs aren't really the best tool for speed control, but they do help a little bit, and that's pretty low-hanging fruit to add stop signs.
We also talked about that a long time ago on Juniper and 9th, putting in stop signs there. This one needed to be before you. And that was the thing, stop signs don't help control speed. That is one of the best stop sign placements I think we've done.
Well, they control speed. They're not the best way to control speed.
No.
You choose non-compliance. People, they don't, why should I stop? No one's here. So they just,
Exactly, but that has really helped that intersection tremendously.
it's a busier road. I don't know how busy Vista is.
Folks, if I have a question, this is my first meeting, so forgive my ignorance. How do I interject or put my 2 cents in? Do I wait? Is there a time that I can interject? It's regarding this type of issue.
Yeah, we can open up the public comment when everybody's done, and then you can, on this, yeah, and then there's one at the very end, but if it's for this item, you can speak up when they're done.
Oh, wait,
Okay, perfect.
But so I think the action is we're approving the city's recommendation, or we reorder them, or
I had a quick question concerning the first intersection. I know that the speed radar feedback sign was $9,000, so we're not including that. But I just wondered whether the city has other radar feedback signs in different locations, whether they could consider relocating one to this intersection temporarily, either right after the improvements are done, or sometime in the future, as a way to save the money but still get the benefit of the radar sign.
Yeah, I think we could look into that. Also, I think that our police department has a grant application for a portable radar speed feedback sign, so that might be, if that grant goes through, then we might be able to do that.
Be a good application for it.
I think Bill mentioned eucalyptus, and that's the one. I think the radar speed signs is similar to Vista, where there's cut-through traffic and there's speeding for years, and I think the radar speed signs are what has been most effective. Maybe add a stop sign. But, yeah.
No, eucalyptus stops, the one stop sign helped a lot.
It did help, yeah.
Still needs more, but maybe it's helped.
Any other discussion or comment, or can I get a motion to approve as presented by staff?
I would have. Is there a
Yeah,
time?
yeah, before we vote, yeah.
Sure, okay.
There's 3 minutes.
Okay, great, thanks.
You just
Okay.
have to vote.
Can we get get a card filled out for him? So at
He
least we-
can, but I can't make him.
Oh,
Oh, I don't mind filling it out.
Okay,
I
yeah,
just-
just so you
my-
guys know I
It's my
can't-
first time here,
yeah.
so I just want to make sure I'm doing it.
Yeah, but I
didn't
will.
want to miss my chance to speak. This is the time.
exactly.
Okay.
Bill brought up a good point earlier about your presentation today and how did folks get the word out to you? Hey, we have a problem on our street. And I guess in the past, they come to you guys on these meetings and say, hey, we got people flying on our street, we need to do something about it. So I just want to know, going forward, if we do have any issues with our street, do I go to you or do I go to Bill?
Right here,
Either one.
here's your point.
But
Public comment.
you do bring it up to transportation.
Okay, so my concern is on my home address on 702 South Tulip, it's a busy street, and it's a shortcut, very similar to your Vista calling project. Folks are going from West Lake Parkway over to 9th Avenue, and they're hauling mud up the hill and down the hill, and there's no stop sign or any type of yield, any type of traffic control to slow them down. And they're going anywhere between 45 and 55, and it's a family neighborhood, so there's kids all in the street, ice cream man's cruising by, kids running across to get ice cream, and folks are using this as a shortcut, and there isn't a way to slow them down. I called Amanda with traffic control, she's an engineer, and I asked, hey, what about speed bumps? They're like, no, we're not doing speed bumps because it messes with EMS. I don't know if that was you or Karen. All right. So EMS, I guess we passed something in 2017 that EMS cannot go over these speed bumps. A, it slows you down, and B, it adds cost to the service and maintenance on vehicles. So they threw that out. So then my next option was, okay, well, can we do stop signs on 7th and 8th that help slow down traffic? I also saw some yield signs, some flashing signs. You guys are the experts, so I'm coming to you to raise my concern and see what we can do to slow traffic down on. So we just had a kid last year. He started to walk, and now I have vested interest. Now that I'm a parent. This is our first kid, so that's why we're really passionate about it. And I just want to be vocal for our community. And if we need neighborhood support, we need to do a traffic test. I know you had several tests out there to monitor the traffic, see if anything comes out. Let me know what I need to do so I can make a difference on our street, please.
Cool.
Thank you.
That-
Thank you for your
Do you need details? Do you need anything else? I didn't do a PowerPoint or anything like that, but I have a screenshot of the map. I mean, what do you guys think from me?
Well, we want to get this on the TMPL, right?
Right, usually we get interested citizens like yourself, you bring up the issues, and we ask staff to evaluate it. So
Oh, that's what you
they'll do their own evaluation.
So it would go into next year's,
That could be in- that could
next
be in
year's cycle.
Right, yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to go on the cycle, but my question is, so you just let her know and she takes care of it?
Come next meeting and make sure we do it.
Here, you take care of it.
So just come next meeting and say, hey, guys, how's 7th Avenue
Make
going?
sure we do it, yeah.
Okay, all right. Anything else you can do?
Tulip, you said.
7th and Tulip. I'll send you a note. And where's the card that I need to fill out? Good. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve as presented by staff?
Well, see, this is the one action item. Do we want to make sure we, kind of what Bill mentioned, are we going to add motions to look at different items for next year?
I was just motioning as presented.
we
Not
just,
not for the next one.
I know, but we want to direct staff to look at this issue.
Yeah.
I think staff understands that we're going to have him talk with her
Okay.
See if that's
Yes.
staff.
and get on the
Yes.
TMPL.
Evaluate this.
Staff, yes.
Before I make a motion, I was going to ask staff, if, let's say the budget runs out, and, project 1 is double the budget, do you then drop off number 4? Or if we approve the motion for all 4 improvements, do you proceed with all 4?
Well, what we would do is that we would group all these 4 into a one project and
Okay.
go for a possible bid. And then we would, based on that, we would determine what to do. Maybe look for any additional funding source if we don't have the funds. We would try to want to complete all 4.
Okay. My point is I'd hate to have Felicita kind of drop off if it became too expensive for even the other 3. But it sounds like they all go together, so it's fine.
Yeah, they would all go together.
Your estimates, you feel pretty confident about your estimates?
Sorry?
You feel pretty confident about your estimates?
Yeah, we ran the numbers a few times, and they are based on the pretty recent bid results from different projects.
I'll motion to approve these 4 projects to be approved for staff recommendation.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and sorry about my cough.
No problem.
And I'm not presenting the next item, so you get a break.
Oh, the VMT, oh,
EMT programmatic mitigation
must be an expert.
update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Happy to be here this afternoon. I know this doesn't seem like a really exciting topic, but I can confirm that it really is. It's a new way of looking at the way we evaluate projects, and it's been a very constructive process to go through. So I'm going to give you some background, and some of it is going to be repetitive from what we've heard. I think we've been talking about it for about a year and a half, I'm pretty sure. But some of it is a bit of a reminder because it gets a little bit complex, and so I'm going to walk you through that process. We're just going to cover 3 different things tonight. Background on how we got here with Senate Bill 743. A little bit of background on mitigation programs, and then what the city is considering has been working on actually for the last 6 or 8 months on a mitigation exchange program. A little bit of background on 743, and I know that all of you have already heard some of this, so I won't really drill down into any kind of detail, but we're really looking at ways the Senate Bill 743 wanted CEQA to shy away from the old level of service analysis and the way that it looks at congestion of a particular project on the immediate roadways. And what it was leaning toward was opportunity for looking at and encouraging infill development, meaning that try to encourage communities to build closer to the center of town and less on the outskirts of town, because that building on the outskirts of town generates more and more miles traveled, and we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing that it wanted to encourage was promotion of people substituting walking trips and biking trips for car trips. Again, reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled, we'll get to that in a second, but also reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and we're all very familiar with that. 743 looked at ways to eliminate the level of service, as I mentioned earlier, and delay. And this image on the right, I think, is really pretty good because it gives a good illustration of the way that we have typically looked at how we handled the additional traffic generated by a development. The immediate need, and I'll say that we still have to do this kind of analysis as part of the general plan because we're following a certain set of rules and in ways that those projects impact the city, and we're trying to get away from congestion. But from a CEQA standpoint, it wanted projects to look not necessarily only at congestion on nearby intersections, but how much traffic a development would generate due to its proximity to transit or walking facilities or biking facilities, things like that. You can imagine some of the developments that have happened in say, the San Diego County region, and those developments that are 10 miles out or 5 miles out do generate more traffic than those that are located in the core of the city. So it really pushed agencies to look at ways to reanalyze how projects impacted the environment, and it selected VMT. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So it changes the mitigation focus from roadway operational improvements, which I talked a little bit before, toward active transportation and travel demand management opportunities. I'll use that word instead. So what's VMT? Vehicle miles traveled. Basically, it's the number of vehicle trips that are induced by a development and then the average length of those trips. You can imagine a development that we've had the success at. A lot of the developments in downtown Escondido, the people that live there, if they want to go to the grocery store, if they want to go to the dry cleaners, if they want to go to a restaurant, they literally walk downstairs and they walk to the restaurant, or they go walk to the store and pick up something for their evening dinner. They don't have to get in a car and drive there. So that's what VMT is really focused on. CEQA guidelines were the bill caused certain changes to be encouraged in CEQA language. For the purposes of this section, vehicle miles traveled refers to the amount and distance of automobile travel attributed to the projects. Vehicle miles traveled exceeding an applicable threshold of significance may indicate a significant impact. That's different than the way that we had evaluated projects through the level of service analysis. Again, we still do that, but we're also, because of SB 743, we're looking at induced travel as a result of a project. A little bit of the timeline, I won't go into every detail, but it started in 2013 when the governor signed Senate Bill 743. The Office of Planning and Research spent the next 5 years developing some guidelines and vetting those through various processes. Then Natural Resource Agencies updated CEQA as a result of that new technical advisory. And then the implementation period took effect in 2020, July of 2020. In April of 21, you'll remember that you all reviewed the guidelines and various steps toward getting there, and City Council approved those in April 2021. This is just kind of a recap of what our thresholds were, what the metrics were. We looked at residential traffic, residential developments, and looked at VMT per capita, vehicle miles traveled by the number of residents. Employment centers, we looked at VMT per employee, retail, another direction. The important piece here, two other important pieces, significance threshold. Basically, 743 said that agencies should adopt language that says sets a target at less than the regional mean, the regional average, and I'll show you a map in a minute. But the target was 15% lower than the regional mean. And the encouragement idea is to get projects to build and think about building and think about improvements that set targets at less than the levels that people are traveling right now. So it's 15% below. Industrial projects didn't have to meet that 15% below. Retail, public, and recreational, the target was, or the significance was any increase at all. The column on the right is what we have been dealing with for the vast majority of projects over the last year since the guidelines had been implemented. Projects that are located in a VMT efficient area. I'll show you a map in a minute. But basically, it's the center part of downtown Escondido, those areas that are close to transit, those areas that are close to dense development. It also looked at locally serving retail. The idea being, if you're going to build a 7-Eleven, it's really going to serve locally serving retail. It's, nobody's going to drive 50 miles to get to a 7-Eleven. Nobody's going to drive 50 miles to get to McDonald's or In-N-Out Burger. So other things like locally serving community purpose facility, small projects, basically any project that really doesn't generate a significant amount of traffic. The idea was that if they met these screening criteria, they didn't have to do any further analysis for CEQA. So it's like you submit a scoping agreement, we review the project, we agree that it isn't going to generate much traffic, and basically as far as CEQA is concerned, environmental concern, you're done. You don't have to go through the process that you used to have to go through. So it was much easier for agencies to do that. So, but what happens if a project doesn't screen out? As I said, over the last year, most of the projects we've been reviewing have been small and have screened out. But we knew that we were going to be addressing projects that are located a little bit farther from the center of Escondido, and they were going to generate more traffic than these significant thresholds. So that's the second part of the phase, the second part of the work that we entered into with Fair and Peers, the same firm that did the guidelines that the city, you all approved early last year and council approved in April. The second phase of that was always known to be, what are we going to do about a mitigation program? How do we make it simple and easy to understand for a development to say, if you're exceeding that threshold, what kinds of projects can you do to help balance out, make it easier for people to walk or bike or take transit? Therefore, leave your keys at home, your car keys at home for at least some of the trips. So the one thing that really helped the process here was this Capcom guide. It basically is a picture here. There were two versions. There was one back in 2010. There was another one that was developed 11 years later, and it went into a lot more detail. And it really started to quantify what some of these mitigation projects could be. The idea was to reduce the number of trips or reduce the distance of travel. Changes in the process, in the project. You could, for example, reduce parking supply to help people to encourage people to drive less. Make it easier for people to bike share. You could do telework as one of the things that's in the document. Even things like parking pricing. Basically, you would charge for parking at a facility, and that would encourage people to use other modes of transportation than for that vehicle that they don't want to pay to park. Easier access to transit, and then improving surrounding active transportation modes. You'll see that in the rest of this presentation, we're focusing more on projects that encourage people to consider, to make it easier, to make them feel safer to walk or bike or to get to transit for their trips. Not everybody, but it's those trips that work for them. So different measures, I won't go into the whole detail, but things like increasing residential density. There's actually a credit allowed for projects that do that. In fact, we have one right now that is taking some credit for that. As I mentioned, pricing or unbundling parking, limiting parking supply, integrating affordable housing. There's a credit for that. providing subsidized transit passes. These things are all in that CAPCOA guide. Some of these community-based measures are, at least in this first phase of our mitigation program, are things that we're focusing more on because it's kind of a low-hanging fruit. It's something that people can understand, and we can get a good handle on what they're doing and whether it has bona fide benefits for a longer term. So providing pedestrian network improvements is a big focus on where we're hoping to go in the next year or two. Constructing, improving bike facilities, improving bus stops, all things like that. These other elements were, again, from the CAPCOA guide, but these elements are more difficult to implement, and while we may consider it in future years, it isn't something that's really on the table too much right now. Again, these are from the CAPCOA guide. Mitigation programs that I mentioned earlier, some of these community-based programs, you pool development mitigation contribution to pay for larger, more effective EMT mitigation strategies. That's a lot of words to try to say really fast, so sorry about that. But it'll make more sense in a minute when I show you some of the projects that we're proposing. Open the ability for individual project to contribute to community-based strategies. More on that later. Can be more effective than project-level measures at reducing VMT and benefit the whole community. We'll pull that together in a second. So basically, there are three different kinds of programs that agencies have been considering really around the region or even around the state of California. One of them is a VMT-based fee program, in lieu fee. The city of San Diego has developed a fairly complex program that's based on $1 per VMT reduced. Or then the VMT exchange program, which is something we've been leaning more toward and really what we're focusing on. Developer might select VMT reduction from proposed list. I won't get into that detail because you'll see that list in a minute. And finally, there's a VMT banking program. Another option, but we have really evaluated all of these different programs, and for trying to find something that's relatively simple to implement and rather something that's beneficial for the city, we're literally leaning toward this exchange program. I don't know that I'll get into all the detail of all this because it's detailed, and let's just kind of jump toward, well, let me focus anyway on mitigation exchange. It's limited complexity, allows for non-infrastructure projects, reduced nexus obligation as compared to a fee program, a little bit simpler. It's a fairly new concept for transportation. It requires this additionality, basically saying that if it's something that you would have already done as part of a project, we really want you to be looking at things that are kind of over and above what you would have routinely done. It's kind of a mismatch between mitigation need, mitigation program, unknown time frame for mitigation life. One of the reasons why we have wanted to lean toward infrastructure projects is because you can build them and they're going to be there for the next 5 years or 10 years. If you go toward a program like Transit Pass, you have to implement something that has somebody to manage the program and then to make sure that those transit passes are renewed every year. It just becomes more complex to implement and then to monitor year after year. So what we really, this is the process that we've gone through over the last, as I said, 6 or 8 months, and we've given you a couple of updates on this. We looked at different mitigation types, as I talked about earlier. We spent a fair amount of time looking at a list of projects that we could include in this exchange program. I'll show you a list in a minute that's actually in the document. We looked at a variety of city documents. We looked at the CAP program, we looked at the bike master plan. We looked at a number of other documents that we had available, those that listed improvements for bike facilities or pedestrian facilities. A fairly iterative process. Evaluating, and then the next part of the process was, what's the value of those kinds of projects? You know, you really, again, we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Well, how do you do that? How do you actually how do you quantify that? So we've gone through that process. And then developing the program document, which is really where we are right now, and then we would be reviewing this program with you as an agency. We'll also be talking to the Business Industry Association to get their feedback on these projects, on this program. And frankly, we've had an opportunity over the last month or two to work with the concepts and the content of this program with individual projects. And it's really helped us understand what looks like it's going to work well and what we may want to delay for a year or two, things like the programmatic elements of it. So in selecting projects, this is fairly simple. They need to be implementable. They need to be able to, we need to show that they can actually reduce VMT. We want to make sure that it's in addition to projects that are already fully funded. We want to guarantee that they be in place for a reasonable amount of time. I talked a little bit about that earlier. There are two different elements that I spoke on earlier. Site-specific measures, meaning things that a developer could do on their own site that they could take advantage of. That Capcom guide, for example, gives a percentage reduction for a kind of a density bonus for projects that are more efficient with space, and really say a project that's an acre in space and has 100 units on it and several different stories. These community-based measures, again, are what we focused more on: providing pedestrian network improvements, constructing those improvements, even things like improving bus stops. If you're a bus user, I lived in the city of Chicago for 10 years and didn't drive a car for 10 years. But I can tell you that standing, waiting for a bus at a bench, or waiting for a bus with a sign that says there's going to be a bus here, isn't nearly as encouraging as if you're waiting underneath a shelter so that in the next 30 minutes, waiting for the bus, that you can sit in the shade instead of sitting in the sun. So things like improving bus stops serve to encourage people to consider another mode of transportation other than driving. How do you actually get to these? How do you actually get to quantifying that? I'm going to kind of skim through this, but I want you to understand how the numbers come to be. Well, our example here is a unit that has a project that has 54 units. You may be familiar that the housing element says that the average housing unit in the city of Escondido has 3.2 people living in it. Everybody know that? Now you do. So if you multiplied 54 units times 3.21, you get 173 units. If we looked at a Sandag map, and I'll show you this real quick, VMT efficient areas are these areas that are green. These are where a lot of the development has happened in the city over the last 5 years or more. You can see that basically what it's saying, if you can see that 10.2, it says that for every person that lives in that area, the model says that they're going to drive 10 miles a day, 10 miles a day. But if you look at this area out here, we'll say Jesmond Dean, just to give you a location. that says that they're going to drive 22 miles a day. And then the average for the region, for the entire region, again, these are things that we put in those guidelines that we all discussed a little over a year ago. The average is the average for the region is that people drive 18.9 miles per day. So again, these projects in the center of the city, they skate. They don't have to do any VMT reduction because they screen out, because it already shows that they're going to generate less traffic than 85% of the average for the region. I know that gets a little bit complex. So if you look at this, we've got 173 residents that live in a building. We know that the area that they're located in, the people drive 18.5 according to the model. So that unit is going to generate 3,200 vehicle miles traveled every day. So if we look at the target here of 85%, we need to make sure that these projects are meeting a target of 15% less than the average. So their target is 2,700. So if they're going to reduce their driving by 15%, that equals about 420 VMT per day. Okay? It'll all come together in a minute here. So in the exchange program, what we've kind of been driving toward, in the back of this document, we're putting together a series of projects that those developments that need to meet targets, that 85% target, can choose to do. They benefit the city and they benefit the projects by reducing the number of, they're getting closer to that 400 VMT that they need to reduce. If they were to build this project at Rose Elementary, basically increasing sidewalk coverage, they would get about 49 VMT. Another project, 101 VMT. If they built this project of sidewalks along Rincon Middle School, they'd get 219. They'd get roughly half of what their target is. If they were to build a mile of sidewalk almost anywhere in the city, they can get about 300 VMT. There are a whole host of projects here, smaller projects, that we like to call low-hanging fruit. And there are things like, if you install high visibility crosswalks in an intersection, by doing that, you're going to make people feel safer about crossing the street. And that would encourage people to take advantage of that opportunity instead of driving. If we were to provide pedestrian hybrid beacons, RFBs, to get them across the street, things like pedestrian countdown signals, refuge islands, speed tables, bulb outs, curb ramps, roundabouts, there's a whole host of things. These will give a credit of about 60 VMT. Now, some of these are relatively inexpensive, some of those are more expensive. So, but the sense is that this document gives developers kind of a menu of things that they can pick and choose from to arrive at the target number that they're going to need to meet. Future things that we've talked about doing, but it requires some staff level investment, some city investment, and someone to manage these programs.
Excuse me, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
On that last one where you're talking about the developers can pick and choose which VMT projects to offset
Right.
what they're doing, does that give them the ability to maybe overbuild where they're building and put in maybe less parking spots because, oh, well, we're picking up extra credits from the VMT over here. And does that make, they're making high density stuff, but that doesn't mean that those people at that high density project are going to be the ones who are walking or taking public transit or whatever. And now all of a sudden we can have this high-density apartment building put here with less parking spaces that are needed, but they're offset by the VMT, but that means that everyone's going to park on the surrounding streets.
Part of that calculation, well, let me look at the map here. If a project, for example, is in this region right here, I would say that they could get some advantage by strategic building, but I don't think that the calculation is going to benefit them in the end, because it's largely driven by where that where that development is and the number of units they actually have. And even if they take advantage of a density bonus, that might be a third of their target, and they're still going to have to achieve the other 2/3 of it. I don't know if that gets to your question.
I'm not sure if there is an easy answer to my question. It's kind of like, I figure it's kind of like when you squeeze a balloon, that air goes someplace.
Sure. Could I try to address your question? I'll do my best. So the parking standards remain. This isn't something that would set aside parking standards. So there's still a minimum amount of parking that is required with new residential development. So that isn't something that would happen. But it is a little bit controversial when you talk about pricing parking, right? Because I know we do have some areas where the priced parking spaces are too costly, and that means that rather than parking on site, the residents are parking on the street. So that certainly isn't a measure that we would encourage. It needs to be appropriate for the area, right? So in a highly urbanized downtown area, pricing parking, might really, and there's a lot of transit, that might really encourage people to not own vehicles. So I think it really depends upon where you are. But in this case, typical Escondido development is still going to be required to build the minimum parking. It's just a matter of whether or not they're charging for parking. Does that answer your question?
A little. I kind of look at this as just another way of getting around things.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's going to evolve. Eventually, I think we see ourselves using mobility as a service more, Uber, Lyft, as our transportation network expands, there's going to be more options. We're kind of in that point now where we'd like to be able to provide more options, and we can't quite get there. So there's definitely going to be some growing pains as we work toward trying to be more VMT efficient.
It's harder for for cities like Escondido or Poway or kind of more suburban, but we're trying to fit in this kind of urban model of these larger cities, and it doesn't work as good for us, but we don't make the state rules.
Yeah, and that's why we're really encouraging these measures that we really want to build. High visibility crosswalks, pedestrian countdown timers. These are things that we know make walking more safe. And so if we can have a project that's building in a rural area, provide those in an area where people are going to be walking at signalized intersections, then we see that as a real asset, right? We still get the housing, but we also get those benefits to the more urbanized areas where people will be encouraged to walk.
I said one comment too is on the list. It seems like it should be kind of regional. So you don't want, say, a project to come in the north side of town and do their mitigation, say, on the south side of town. It's easier or cheaper, whatever. Seems like it should be more of a regional thought, but that's just my opinion.
If I could go along with that too, Bill actually stole exactly what I was going to be asking with your comment and question. But it just seems like this whole thing is just basically, like by any other term, it's a tax. When a new development goes in, you're saying, okay, you're having this kind of an impact. In order to mitigate it, you need to, from a selection of projects, do this crosswalk, and like we're saying, regional could be on completely other side of town. So basically, you're just asking them for how many of these projects, whatever the project costs, let's say $50,000. So it's just basically a tax, another tax on a development, so they can have the development put in, let's say on the perimeter, more of the perimeter of the town, where they have to pay this to pay for another project that might not even be within 5 miles of where the development's going in. It could be several miles away. That's obviously, it just seems to me, it's just, in any other words, it's just a tax on new development, so.
Commissioner Hatley, I think Commissioner Thornburg hit it on the head with respect to this is not the city's policy. This is a policy that, it's state law, essentially. And so what we're dealing with right now is we have several projects in the semi-rural areas, North Broadway area, that are not able to mitigate their VMT impacts under state law. And so this particular program is designed to help these projects be able to build. And the bar that's been set by the state with respect to what it takes to mitigate VMT is extremely high. Some of the other cities are setting VMT in lieu fees at $1,500 per VMT. I mean, very expensive impact fees associated with VMT. So I think this exchange program is about trying to open up the opportunity to continue to provide housing while at the same time meeting the state law.
With those projects that are not able to currently meet the VMT and they need the credits, why are they not able to meet it?
Because currently there isn't an exchange program available. This is kind of a brand new thing. So what happens is they have unmitigated, significant VMT impacts that they're not able to mitigate. And so what that means is that these projects that are 30, 50, 100 units are having to prepare environmental impact reports and ultimately make overriding findings to say, well, there's no feasible mitigation out there. And so what this does is it enables projects to prepare a mitigated negative declaration instead of an EIR, a much less burdensome and time-consuming process, and actually provide the mitigation as a part of the project. And so it really streamlines the development process and really helps those projects get to the finish line more quickly, and at the same time, we're able to provide some benefits to our active transportation network.
And that's basically based on the 85% reduction that they would have to hit, and because they're more likely, as Mr. Warrenberg pointed out to me, they're in the blue area, but yeah, you can't even get a bus over there.
Yeah, there's not a lot of options for residentials out in the blue areas. They can build a little bit of sidewalk, like on site, but so this is really helping those projects.
Thank you.
And just about at the end anyway, so it's good.
Go back to the regional thing. Was there a thought of, it seems like, in my opinion, you don't want the developers to choose what they want to do. Somehow the city wants to be involved in have an approval process or a vetting process, that's all.
And that has been the way it's worked out. A number of developers, they don't have the advantage of the list yet, but they do have. We have had discussions about the kinds of projects that they could do. It has worked out so far for the few projects that we've done that we've had to get involved with. We have helped identify those projects, and I think that they've appreciated that
Do you
opportunity.
think you'd have them required to be approved by the Transportation Safety Committee?
Wow. Whoa. No.
Yeah, I mean, we are, as we look at projects, ideally we try to identify measures close to the project, right? That the residents will actually benefit from. But we also want to identify appropriate projects, right? We don't want to put in a high visibility crosswalk across an area that we normally wouldn't do that, right? So we're helping the developers come up with, hey, these are the areas that are close to your project where there are needs, and if you fill these needs, then you can mitigate your impacts.
And we're basically saying the developer has to do this project. It's not that we would do it and they pay us for it or whatever. It's that they go and do it. Or bid it out or whatever.
Yes, so the way that the program is structured is that at the time that they go through their environmental process, they would identify what they're going to build, and they would cover that in their environmental document, typically a mitigated negative declaration, and then that would be included as a part of their project, and they would deploy those measures in advance of their first occupancy. So they would remain in control of those mitigation measures and the timing for those mitigation measures to, so we don't want to hold them up or put them in some other process. They maintain control of their own mitigation.
Thank you.
We're pretty much to the end. So the recommendation that we would like from you is we'd like to request that you approve this program and that we get to take that program to City Council for their approval.
Another question. It doesn't sound like from your presentation that we're moving in this direction, but I just have to ask this. I know the coastal cities, I believe in particular, are approving larger or, just whatever size residential projects and allowing for less parking because the project is within a certain parameter of like a public transportation, maybe the Sprinter or a bus stop or whatever. So they're saying, okay, normally you'd have to have 20 parking spots for your 10 units. Now you only need to have 10 or something because you're close to this bus stop. I just want to make sure that this isn't moving in that direction because I think, as we kind of mentioned, people will always find another place to park, and they're going to park in another neighborhood. They're going to park illegally. They're going to impact another area. So I really don't want to see developers getting off the hook and allowed to have higher density units, less parking on site because they're within a certain public transportation mode, certain distance from it. Just want to confirm that the city isn't really moving that direction under this.
So that isn't a part of this particular program. The parking ratios and requirements are something that are set by the zoning code. And so that isn't something that traffic engineering generally deals with or governs. But you're correct. That is the trend, is to provide fewer parking near transit. And so I can't say whether or not, that's in our future because it's kind of outside of our area of expertise, but that isn't a part of this particular program.
Thank you.
I'm just noting the agenda says we're just receiving an update, not necessarily, this isn't really an action item, but you're saying it is an action item?
Yes, we are asking for your support and approval so that recommendation of this particular program to move it forward to the City Council. I apologize that it wasn't communicated that way in the staff report, but we do have a couple of projects that are getting ready to release their environmental documents and have asked us to try to push this forward. And so if the commission is comfortable with what we've presented to you to date, then we would love to receive your approval to push that forward to the City Council. I think it's important to note, and I think Craig mentioned this in his presentation, that this is a menu of options for development projects. We expect to continue to try to come up with more options, programs, programs like the FRED program downtown. Something like that in Escondido is something we'd very much like to eventually come up with and potentially fund through this particular program. But those programs aren't yet ready. So this will be a first of many conversations about VMT Exchange and how we can try to facilitate more housing in our city.
And if I could add to that, I know that we've talked in previous meetings about this comprehensive active transportation program strategy that the city will be doing and hopefully issuing an RFP in the next couple of months. That effort will identify, part of the focus of that effort will be to identify future projects that we could use as active transportation projects that could be funded with through the VMT program. That could be one of the funding sources. We feel like the list that we have right now will work for the next year or two, but we'll be supplementing that list with the CATS list we develop.
Could you go back to your list real quick? I just want to, the list you had of the alternative mitigation.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is only part of the list.
Yeah.
I was trying to get it readable and to fit on the
You're going to
page.
give us part of the information and want us to prove it.
I think the full list was in the staff report, and so I think he's just moved it to
Yes.
2 separate pages. So the first page is here and the second page is there.
That is true. The entire list was in the staff report.
Just on the next page, I just want to make sure that we have, trails in there, because you have sidewalks, there's bikeways on the next page, but sometimes you could have a trail, some sort of a public trail. Next slide, yeah. So you have, like I said, sidewalks, you've got bike paths, but sometimes you have these pedestrian trails or pathways.
Right.
That could
So
be, it's again,
we tried to identify some specific projects that could be picked from the menu, but then we left a broader menu of the type of project that someone could do, but not a specific from, this street from here to here. For example, Class 1 or Class 4 bikeway, that's a trail, or Class 4 is on the roadway, and that's basically anywhere.
Yeah, but
So
Class 1's
2
good.
bike lane could be anywhere on any city street. Same thing with all of the items in 2.1 up here. Sorry, I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see that. So. Any of these high visibility crosswalks, hybrid beacon, bulb outs, pedestrian refuge islands, again, some of those items are more expensive than others, but they all have value in encouraging people to walk. The other thing that I wanted to say, and Julie touched on it briefly too, is that it's part of a balance. While there's certainly value in identifying projects that are within the proximity of a particular development, there are advantages to building projects that encourage, that are in an area where more people are walking or biking. And in the end, the balance, if you built a similar facility, say on North Broadway, you might have 20 people a day using it. But if you built that same facility in downtown Escondido or some more dense area of Escondido, you might have 200 people using that a day. So the balance of actually encouraging more people to walk, even though it's farther away from the project, benefits the city as a whole.
I think my thought about the regional approach was not that you're the residents who are, say, these home buyers, but it's the residents that are nearby, and they're actually impacted by the increased traffic. And so they're the ones that are kind of, taking this burden of development, but if they have improvements in their area that they can use, it kind of offsets that, as you would traditionally have in a development where they're mitigating things nearby. That's my thought.
Come on, we're all Escondido.
Well, I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be, but that's.
We're Escondido, it doesn't matter, north, south, region, Escondido.
And to your point, developers do prefer, right, to locate improvements, right? Because they can point to it and they can tell hey, I'm building this for the neighborhood. I'm making it nicer. I'm leaving it nicer. And so we always try to identify things close to the project vicinity. I think that's definitely a win-win.
I guess why I brought up trails because there's one job we worked on where it's not a Class 1 bikeway, it's a trail because it's by the river and it's in the flood zone, and so therefore they don't want to pave it. But cyclists can use it, people can walk on it, but it's not a sidewalk, it's a trail. And again, those are good transportation elements.
Absolutely.
Being-
And those are certainly things we'll be identifying in the CATs that will cross over to this project, this funding source.
Any other comments, discussion? Looking for a motion to approve recommending the BMT program to the city council for approval.
I can move to approve that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Motion carries. Okay, item G, old business, project status reports.
Okay, I only have a couple of slides. I just wanted to show you a couple of pretty pictures before we depart. It's always the best part. So all of these updates were in the report. The first project I wanted to highlight is our traffic signal communication grant project. We mentioned it last time. We're super excited about that project. That's why the picture is here. So it's grant and local share funded, and we are going to design and install software and hardware upgrades to our traffic signal communication system. We're going to upgrade signal controllers, vehicle detection, and communication. And these upgrades will significantly improve our signal operations and make our signals more responsive, and also support optimizing the signal timing. And I'm happy to report that the phase 1 engineering project was awarded to Advantech, and we have already kickstarted the project, and we are in the process of evaluating the existing equipment. We're anticipating that this project will wrap up in the spring of 2023. And the second project I wanted to highlight is the Escondido Creek Trail Expansion and Renovation Project. The best contact for this project is the Director of Communications and Community Services, Joanna Axelrod. And with this slide, I wanted to show that this project is just one of the ongoing or continuous efforts to improve the creek trail that goes through town. This Prop 68 project, like we call it, it focuses on the segment of between Broadway and Midway, with most of the improvements focusing in the segment between Date and Rose and Midway. So here are some of the existing pictures. And here I wanted to show you the segment on the north side of trail. So this project improves the north side and the south side, both sides, depending on what's along the creek. So on the north side, between Date and Midway, we're going to have a decomposed granite pathway. We're going to have seating areas, water bottle fillers, weigh station, fitness stations, and play areas. We're going to have new California-friendly landscaping. We're going to have garden areas. The fencing is going to be updated, and also the lighting is going to be updated to improve safety and just make the overall appearance. I did not know the slide has those, but they do. So, and here I just wanted to share this exciting, I just find this so beautiful. This is on the existing Date Street crossing. So the paving is going to be enhanced with this beautiful basket weave patterns. So it's really going to make an impact, and it's an art piece in itself.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And this is another location I wanted to highlight. This is near Washington Park. There is going to be a fitness court, and the area between the trail and Washington Park is going to be opened instead of having a fence there. And most of all, I wanted to let you know that Joanna Axelrod gave a presentation, very comprehensive presentation to City Council on January 26th. And this presentation can be viewed through the city website. And here's the link for it. And also the project has a website that they update regularly, and that has all the pictures and more information on what is being done on all the segments. So I hope you have a chance to take a look at that. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. School area safety.
I have, well, I saw this one. You just read the whole. Yeah. Through to lower Okay, so school area safety, striping and signing improvements were made along North Broadway corridor near Reedy Creek Elementary in efforts to improve traffic flow and safety. Council action, May 11th, 2022, Council adopted Resolution 2022-56, award contract for Staccato Parkway Extension Project, authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city to execute a public improvement agreement with Flatiron West, Inc. for construction of the Staccato Parkway, sorry if I don't say this right, Andreessen Drive to West Valley Parkway project.
Yay.
Project in the amount of $23,792,400.50 to complete street improvements and extension of Citricato Parkway from Anderson Drive to West Valley Parkway. May 25th, 2022, Council adopted Resolution 2022-64, Local Roadway Safety Plan and Highway Safety Improvement Program Grants, thus approving the Local Roadway Safety Plan, LRSP, and authorizing the city engineer to submit applications for Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, grant funding, file number 1050-70. June 8th, 2022, Council adopted Resolution 2022-76, Active Transportation Program Grant Application and Budget Adjustment for Sidewalks on Citrus Avenue, authorizing the Director of Development Services or her designee to apply for up to $3 million in Active Transportation Program, ATP, funds from the California Transportation Commission, CTC, for a Safe Routes to Schools, SRTS, grant to improve student access to Hidden Valley Middle School, and if awarded, to accept the grant funds and complete necessary grant and budget documents. And then there's no further oral communications.
Item K. Any other questions or items for future discussion from our commissioners? No?
I don't subject.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Let's go, Larry.
Okay, well, now that our LRSP is approved, there's the South Center City Parkway corridor plan. I think maybe a year ago, we mentioned that once we had the program in place, we could seek funding or to study it, because again, between Escondido Boulevard and the freeway on-ramp, there's extremely high speed. You've got 1 signalized intersections, 3 unsignalized. There is like a 4-car accident there last night. Anyway, it's just still in need of study to make it more safe. There's 2 high-density projects under construction, and you've got the Canterbury Gardens has been demoed, so has the Mexican restaurant, so there's more coming in, and it's an older area of highway safety, existing improvements, and it still needs to be analyzed, I think, for improved safety of this corridor for the city.
That particular project, just to give you, I could just give you a quick update. The local road safety plan was approved We're in the process right now of putting together an application for those top 3 projects to submit for highway safety improvement funds. We're also looking at another grant program, Safer Streets for All. It's a federal program. It's also due in September, and the intent is to ask for funds to do that signalized intersection on that corridor between Escondido Boulevard down to down at Escondido Boulevard, Bullard, and Brotherton. Take a look
Right
at
there.
what the best
Correct.
way is to handle that. We had unfortunately heard about that crash down there ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenging location.
It is challenging. I don't have any answers. I ask you to study it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end. You get a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll say.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your service to the Escondido community. Have a great day.